Great, great. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to I Rise Above's Wellness Collective webinar series for the month of March. We're going to have Amy Banocy present to us today, speak to us about her new book. So I'll just do a little introduction of Amy before I turn over the floor to her to talk about her book, Bearing It All, Reflections of My Breast Cancer Fuckery. Perfectly labeled. I love it.
Thank you.
Amy is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, dynamic speaker, facilitator, and most importantly, mom. In this webinar, there'll be 3 touchstones for keeping it real and taking care of yourself during breast cancer fuckery, as experienced by Amy, who's a recovering optimist and people pleaser. When Amy was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2020, it challenged everything she knew about herself. As a serial optimist, she thought she'd tackle cancer the same way she did everything else, with positivity and a smile. Boy, that sounds familiar. After all, as a coach and speaker, she was teaching others the power of these traits for living. When things got crazy and she was hit with unexpected curveballs, Amy found it hard to keep up the positive mindset she'd always relied on. This was very difficult for her to grapple with and understand. She hid her emotions, which led to fearing how not being 100% positive might impact her health. At the same time, she craved a safe space to scream and release all of the emotional trauma she was experiencing. All of this while exhausted, nauseous, and trying to lovingly kick cancer's ass. I love that. Perhaps you can relate. I sure can. In this webinar, you will leave feeling confident about fully expressing the emotions that come with breast cancer diagnosis while maintaining a healthy outlook and taking care of you, most importantly. These tips helped Amy through her breast cancer journey, or as she likes to refer to it as the fuckery, and have also led her to change how she lives every day. Spoiler alert, it turns out a smile and I'm fine aren't always the best answer. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy. Welcome.
All right. Well, thank you. I am so happy to be here, and I'm just so grateful to Jillian. She's been so incredibly supportive from the first day that we met and had a conversation, and was fully behind everything that I was working on. She was an early reader for the book and provided a review for the back cover. So if anyone gets it, they'll get to see her quote on there. And I'm just eager to share some of my insights with all of you today. And as Jillian said, I really hope that after this time together, that you'll have some tools, maybe some reminders. They might already be things that you've known before, or some new tools to help you feel confident about feeling all of those feelings that we have and expressing them, while also maintaining that healthy sense of self. As a recovering optimist and people pleaser, all of this really was reinforced to me during my time with breast cancer. And a couple caveats that I will share with you. One of the things that unfortunately I am still struggling with side effect wise from my treatment is word recall and memory. I still have a lot of brain fog. And so if you see me start to, kind of blank out a little bit or any of that, that is what that is. And I do keep notes by me now, to help reassure me that I'm able to deliver the information that I want to give to you despite all of that. So typically the other thing, in complete honesty, when I speak to a group, and Jillian and I were talking about this, that I like for it to be an experience. I want it to be something that we experience together, as opposed to me just talking at you. So while this is a webinar, I want to do a couple things in the beginning that I know best will help to bring us together, even though I can't see your faces. And even though we are all over the globe, and some might consider some of this a little woo-woo. So try to stick with it. If it's uncomfortable at any point, just open your eyes. There's no wrong or right to anything that we're doing. So I just like, before I present, to bring our collective energy together and just take a minute to get grounded, especially at this time of day. This is really one of the things that became sacred to me during all of my treatment, was the time that I could just take a minute and breathe. And I learned a lot of great practices along with that. And by practicing these, they not only helped when I was in that fight or flight stage, or I was feeling a lot of what people would consider negative feelings, but I'm opening with them because I think they're an important tool in our life in general, especially this time of day, right? We might have been rushing around at work or with children or whatever it is we're doing, and now we're in a different setting. So just going to take a minute and guide us through a quick grounding exercise. And then I am going to pull 2 oracle cards that will help us through this time together. So you're also, throughout the webinar today, you're going to have a few opportunities, and this is one of them, where you can take a few minutes to journal. I've been told in the past, when I have spoken about this book, that people have a lot of things that come to mind for them or come up for them in their own experience. So I have shifted this a little bit this time to allow some time for you to be able to journal. So if you want to do that and you don't have it with you, you can go ahead and get some pen and paper. So again, if nothing comes up for you during the breathing exercise, it's no worry. You can journal about anything, or just, take your time. So just go ahead and close your eyes. And if possible, have your feet touching the floor or the ground, wherever you are. And just take a few deep cleansing breaths. Allow yourself to be fully present in this moment for this time. We have so much else going on in our lives at a very high speed. So allow yourself to calm your nervous system, relax, give yourself permission to forget about what came before this moment and anything else that you might have to do when we're finished. And I always suggest that if there's anything today that you are looking for guidance on, or any question that you've been thinking about, that you can pose that in your mind's eye. And you can choose, when I say the next statement, to substitute or to choose any of the words that I use. Some people refer to a higher power, God, universe, spirit, whatever your word is. That this time together can help you see what it is that you may need to see, or hear what it is that you may need to hear to serve not only your highest and greatest good, but the highest and greatest good of all beings everywhere. And so I am quickly going to share the first one. Here says, nourish your soul. Whoop, can't really see it too well in the light there. Nourish your soul. And I think that that is very appropriate for what we're talking about today. And the second is trust in dreams. for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. So trusting in your dreams. So if there's anything that came up for you during that time, you can feel free to start journaling about that. Because we are on a time limit, I'm going to go ahead and keep talking. And we can also open it up for questions at the end. So it's important to me that we acknowledge that we're all here because we have breast cancer in common, and because Jillian has created this incredible community to bring us together and to lift us up. And it's important to know that each of our stories is different, and they're each our own. And in sharing today, I want to be clear, and I say this in the book as well, that I'm sharing my own thoughts, and these are based on my own experiences. I'm in no way telling anyone that this is the right way, the best way. It's simply a way. It's meant to be a resource. So I encourage you to take what resonates with you and just leave aside anything that may not, or put it to the side to maybe come back to later. I want to share with you a story from my book, and my bookmark just fell out, so here we go. This is called The Waiting. What if I have cancer? Caveat also, obviously by the title of my book, you all know that there is some foul language here, okay? What if I have cancer? Fuck. Why do I feel like it's there? Like I know I have it and I'm just waiting to hear it. I know it doesn't help to worry, but how can I not worry? This is my journal entry on December 8th, followed by, why the hell do I have to wait for this info? Why can't it be faster? Because the universe is on its own time, Amy, and its timing is perfect. If it was too fast, you'd question that too. Fear and dread not only land in my journal, but also overtake my body and mind. On December 29th, I write, my mind and body are so anxious, tight stomach, literally in knots, crying, so emotional, wiggly antsy body, like restless leg all over, sweating last night, heart racing, nauseated, headache. This is the longest fucking week. Don't like feeling all this anxiety. I need to stop it and break this cycle. I don't want to feel this way. I want to focus on the positive. I don't want to sit in these icky feelings, and I most certainly don't know what to do with them. I want to be back in my comfort zone, to turn it all off and be happy, smiley, Amy. I hide all of this though. People ask, how are you? And I simply say, I'm fine. To the outside world, I am still that happy person. And that's a portion of that part. And I share that with you because that was obviously before my diagnosis. And I did want to be that happy, positive, bubbly self. And before cancer was found in my body, just to give you a little background, I am the youngest of two daughters, and I question how I became a serial optimist. One of the reasons is because as a child, I think we all fall into different roles, and my role was really the peacemaker, the easy one, the happy one, the optimist, and my smile kind of became to me what brought me love. That carried with me after childhood. Maybe it's in my DNA, I don't know, but it carried with me into my personal and my professional life. Professionally, I started studying things like the law of attraction, emotional intelligence, and I really believed that we were in control of our outcomes in life. That's kind of hard to take when you are then diagnosed with something like breast cancer. I really wanted to believe that I was right in all of this, and that the key to living a full life, was a happiness mindset. Now, is it true? I do, despite everything I've been through in the past 2 years, believe that it is. And I believe it's a key piece. But a large piece and an important piece that I was missing was balance around emotional expression, because I was so conditioned to see all of the positive that I felt that if I expressed what people considered negative emotions, anger, fear, sadness, rage, envy, I was afraid that I was going to hurt myself, that it was not helpful to my healing, right? And we hear so much about staying positive and how that can be helpful. And all of this that I was hearing is exactly what fell into my journal that day. And all of those thoughts fell into my journal, but they didn't leave my journal. I didn't talk to anybody about them. I didn't allow myself to express them. So I was diagnosed in December 30th of 2020 after a routine mammogram. And like many of you, that led me to follow-up mammogram and MRI, biopsies, all of the things. Thought I was going to have a lumpectomy. And as Jillian said, I came upon a lot of bumps in the road, which many people in this type of scenario do. Cancer has no bounds and it has no rules that it needs to follow. And I am sure that my story, while it's my story, may have pieces and parts that resonate with you, or that you can shake your head and say, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. And I thought, how do I stay positive? How do I stay positive? Because I wanted to be able to stay healthy. And I thought if I could simply keep my smile, right? When my diagnosis changed from DCIS to stage 2 invasive breast cancer, and instead of a lumpectomy, I was having a bilateral mastectomy. And then after that, being told that I was going to have chemo and radiation and all of these different changes along the way, I thought going into it sincerely that positivity and a smile were the way. But I was wrong, and I learned important lessons along the way that really would end up, I believe, saving me, saving my emotional well-being, my mental health, as well as the mental health and emotional well-being of those around me, because I was able to be clear and I was able to be honest. So this comes as no surprise, I'm sure, to you, but during my breast cancer fuckery, I realized that so many people talk about, we hear so much about the physical side effects of breast cancer and of the treatments and of the surgeries, but there's not as much talk, or at least I did not hear and did not feel a level of support on the emotional and mental level. And it really led me to feeling so alone when I was in some of those dark places. And after doing a lot of journaling, I realized, this is what I do for a living. And so as a speaker and a writer, I realized that I wanted to create a way for people to have more conversations about this side of breast cancer and to normalize the wide spectrum of emotions that come with a diagnosis and treatments and survivorship. And so that's where Bearing It All, which is my book, started to become an idea. And the book shares stories, my own stories, realizations I had along the way. It's very raw, it's very real, and I do not tie breast cancer up in a pretty pink bow in this book. Breast cancer to me is not pretty. And I wish I had known more about that. I really wish I did, so that I hadn't felt so alone in those moments. And I feel that women with breast cancer, we have enough going on, right? All of the appointments and all of the things we're thinking about and arranging childcare and just everything. And we have enough unknowns. And the truth of what we're going to go through should not be an unknown. I believe that there needs to be more conversation around this piece of breast cancer. So much like this today, anyone reading the book, I want them to feel like we're sitting down, having a conversation with a cup of coffee and sharing our own stories. As we know, contrary to much social belief, breast cancer does not end after treatment. It is a whole new phase, and I'm learning that in survivorship. It impacts our lives forever. And the 3 cornerstones that I'm going to share with you became lifelines for me during cancer. And interestingly enough, have really remained important in my life as a survivor, both in my personal and my professional life. So the 3 touchstones that I'm going to talk about today is honoring your feelings and knowing that they're valid is number 1. Number 2 is setting boundaries while also asking for and accepting help, kind of a tricky and or. And the 3rd is surrounding yourself with community. So after each one or during, if you would like, you are more than welcome to take out your journal and just write down if anything comes to mind for you. And I will provide you also with a journaling prompt after each one that you're more than welcome to journal about as well. And depending on how the time is going, we can talk about those at the end too. So as I said, as a serial optimist, I did not express things like anger, sadness, etc., negative emotions very well. My sister and I took a trip to the beach before my mastectomy, and I can clearly remember walking along that boardwalk. It was our last day there. And she turned to me and she said, "You know, you haven't talked much about your surgery." And I kind of brushed it off and I said, "Oh, you know, I am not, it's fine. We're going to get this done and that's going to be it. And I won't let cancer define me." And at that point, I was scheduled to have a bilateral mastectomy, and they believed that that was going to be it. And that statement, "I will not let cancer define me," has echoed in my head and in my ears since that day. And as many of you can probably relate, as I went through this time with breast cancer, it kind of became the main topic. It became the main topic of conversation with people. I started joining cancer communities. I started looking at Facebook groups. Most of what I posted on social media had to do with my cancer fuckery. And that was when I had the energy, right? And because I had this loud statement in my head of "I will not let cancer define me," I started to view that as a failure. I started to view the fact that I thought I was letting it define me. And I felt a lot of shame. And shame can feel very dark and lonely and sad. And I kept it to myself. I kept it all inside because I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to change their perception of me. I didn't want to burden them. I didn't want to lose, most importantly, that love that I'd been conditioned I would receive when I had a bright smile and a positive attitude. And so many months later, I'm sitting at coffee with my sister. This is a couple months into chemo. And I'm just ridden with this feeling of shame and all of these really deep emotions. And I started crying and I told her exactly what I was feeling. And bless her, she reassured me. And the statement she said has stuck with me. She said, "You are not failing, you are feeling. You're not failing, you're feeling." And she explained to me, like, this is what's expected, right? We've been kind of waiting for you to feel these things. And it felt like a huge weight was lifted off of me and just reminded me that I can feel these deep negative feelings. And I put negative in quotes because that's how in this world we talk about them, but I truly don't consider them negative, because feeling those things, as I'm going to share with you, kept me healthy, I believe. So in honoring your feelings and knowing that they're valid no matter what, people handle something as big as cancer in different ways, right? No matter what you're feeling, no matter what, it's valid. It's your feelings, and nobody can take that away from you. And I realized that while here I was thinking to feel those emotions was not positive, and that it might negatively impact my life and my health, I realized that in holding in these feelings, and holding in, imagine holding in for months upon months, the anger, the sadness, the grief, other than putting pen to paper or hands to, fingertips to computer keys, that they were likely playing a more negative role on my well-being than to feel them. And if you tend to be a positive person or a people pleaser, a smiler, the easy one like me, it can be hard to keep up with that. As I refer to before cancer, Amy, in the book, before cancer, Amy preached this professionally. I would teach people and talk to people about how having a positive mindset and how our thoughts become our reality and all of that. And it is true to an extent. But the extent is that cancer is not pretty. And we need to acknowledge that. And we deserve to feel that. Cancer can suck at times. Sometimes it's for extended periods of time. And it's important that we feel the feelings associated with this. You are allowed to be sad because you had to miss your kid's birthday party. You are allowed to have envy for your friends who are out and about having a fun time while you're stuck at home recovering after a chemo treatment. And my goodness, you are allowed to get angry when your diagnosis or your treatment changes. And yes, these are all personal examples. And for far too long, I held in how these made me feel. So I started with therapy. And we worked through these feelings, and I learned some ways to process them out of my body. And again, this is a personal experience. It's different for everybody. But for me, what has been so helpful is acupuncture, Jin Shinjitsu, talking, being honest with people, continuing to write, and breathing with vision. And when I say breathing with vision, what I mean by that is, if you've ever been in therapy, sometimes they'll say, picture your anger in your body. What does it look like? What's its shape? What's its color? And I could never do that. And so what my therapist had taught me to do is to breathe and feel what I was feeling. And then with my out breath, picture that feeling, picture whatever I was angry about, picture whatever I was feeling sad about out of my breath, so that it literally was getting out of my body, right? So those are some of the tools that I used in order to help me start, and that was only the beginning of feeling and expressing those feelings. This is something that I continue to work on now. Sometimes there are things that can trigger old emotions, old patterns, old feelings. Recently, I had a very unfortunate situation where somebody completely invalidated my feelings, and it was very upsetting and painful and triggering. And it's important for us to know that this will happen. There are likely people that are going to invalidate. There are likely people that might say, oh, it wasn't that bad, or everything happens for a reason, or it could be worse. And some people, honestly, it's a tool. It's a tool that they use intentionally, making you question your feelings. But other people, it's really unintentional, and they're trying to cheer us up in what is a very, very stressful situation most of the time. And even though it's done by accident and with good intentions, it hurts, right? It hurts when people invalidate our feelings. And so I want you to take away the knowledge and the deep knowing that your feelings are your feelings and nobody can take that away from you. Excuse me. So one of my favorite people is Brene Brown, and I turn to her quote a lot when I'm having trouble expressing my emotions. And her quote is, "Vulnerability is the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome." The courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. I would say what we've been through with breast cancer brings up some pretty deep vulnerability. And I've had people tell me, why would you write this book? Why would you want to keep talking about breast cancer? Like, just have it happen, put it in your pocket, go on, go back to being a mom, go back to the work you're doing. And that's a choice. I chose that I wanted to make a voice for this. And I want you to know that if there's something inside of you that feels like you still, if you want to be quiet and move on, that's fine. You have the right to talk about breast cancer as long as you want. You have the right to grieve how you want and for as long as you want. This is major, major trauma. Do not feel like you have to smile and tell everyone you're okay, like I wrote in that journal entry. Don't feel like you have to get over it just because treatment's finished and just because it might make other people uncomfortable. Okay? Your feelings are not right or wrong. Feelings are simply in our brain. They are a reflection of our thoughts, our experiences, and our perceptions. And that's why two people, you and I, having the same experience, could have the same experience and interpret it and feel very different things about it. There are going to be people that'll understand how you want to express your feelings, and there'll be some people that won't. There are going to be some people that continue to undermine, unfortunately, and invalidate our feelings. In my opinion, having gone through that with some folks, I don't think that those are the people to surround ourselves with. It made me begin to question my own feelings, thoughts, and worthiness. So the importance of knowing that your feelings and your emotions are all valid and are all true. The writing prompt that I have for you is, are you honestly acknowledging your emotions? Or do you tend to smile and say, it's fine? And what emotions have you been feeling recently that you may be able to come up with a way to express them? So the second touchstone that I learned was about setting boundaries. And boy, was this an interesting and fun one, because it also comes along with asking for and accepting help, which I don't know about you, but I was not very good at. I don't really like to ask for help. Well, I should say didn't, because things have shifted. And it was always very hard for me to accept help. To me, if I wanted to ask for help or accept help, I was overstepping a boundary. That's what I thought in my mind. I was overstepping a boundary. So in the beginning of my diagnosis, I remember when I, was first diagnosed, and I told my parents I was going to keep them in the loop about every single thing. Well, little did I know that I was way overpromising on what I could deliver. Because as we all know, every single thing is a huge mountain. There's a lot of information, and we're running on limited fuel a lot of the time. And I can remember after my first appointment with my breast surgeon when I learned that a lumpectomy was not an option and that the cancer was so widespread in my breast that she would, very highly recommend a mastectomy. I went back to my car. My husband and I had driven separately, and I went back to my car and I wanted to share this news with my family. We're a very close family. And so I FaceTimed with my sister and my parents all together. And there they were on the screen. And I thought this was a great idea because I thought, well, I'm at least, only FaceTiming one time instead of 2 or 3 to share this information. And I'm sitting in my car trying to update them. I'm crying. I'm feeling completely exhausted. And after I finished that conversation, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to keep up with this level of communication. It was completely draining. And, with everything that breast cancer brings with it and brought me, I just didn't have the energy to be as communicative as I normally would. And I knew that I was going to have to talk to my family about this because it just wasn't how we typically operated. And for you, it may be, your place of work, or it may be a friend. For me, it was my family. And I got to a place where I stopped feeling like I needed to return every message. I stopped answering every call. I put up these really hard boundaries. It was not easy, but I was able to focus on me and not reply to, all of the text messages and the emails and all of those things. And when I did, it might have even just simply been, thanks for checking on me. Thanks for thinking of me, things like that. And it can be tricky because we want people to help and people want to be in the loop. And I felt, don't get me wrong, I feel completely blessed that I have such close friends and family who wanted to help and wanted to be kept in the loop. And of course, I didn't want to be rude. But after that phone call, I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, cancer is going to be just draining, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally. And I wasn't even undergoing treatment at that point, mind you. So my parents came in for my bilateral mastectomy. And during the recovery was when we found out that it was invasive. And so thankfully, they were able to stay here a bit longer. One of the boundaries that we set was they were not staying with us. You will find in the book that I had a very gracious neighbor who was in Florida because of the pandemic. She had worked in Florida. And so she offered them her house. And so that was an easy way to solve that boundary. I can imagine it would have been much more difficult if that were not available to us. But they started going back and forth between here, and my parents live in Florida. And when they were here, of course, they wanted to be helpful, right? And they told me, we want to be helpful. We want to know what we can do. They didn't want to be a burden. And I'm not sure if you can relate, but sometimes just their presence in the house. I have 3 children, and sometimes having their presence in the house would become more stressful than if I was home alone or home just with my kids. And I felt really bad saying that. And somewhere in that time of chemo, pretty early on, I had a tough conversation with them about exactly what it was that was helpful and what was not. And with the help of my therapist, she guided me to make a list of the things that are helpful and the things that are not. And in a very kind way, shared with them that, for example, offering to do the laundry was incredibly helpful. If they were doing the laundry and they were asking my husband, who was, at the time working from home, trying to work, we live in a small townhouse, so in my kid's bedroom, asking him, where everything went and things should be put away, that became stressful, right? My dad sitting on the couch watching the news, which we tend not to have on when the kids are around, was not helpful and would tend to activate my nervous system. And I would get really anxious because I didn't want to be rude and I didn't want to tell him. But sometimes I realized that sometimes those closest to us are keeping busy and they're doing these things. They're helping us because it's their way of coping and it's their way of taking control. My mom once said that to me. She said, I'm running around your house like crazy, picking up laundry and dishes and everything because it's something that she could take control over in a situation that was so out of her control, right? I can only imagine being a mother and going through that. And so it was all meant with love, but we ended up sharing this list with my parents. And I remember my mom being so grateful. She said that it was helpful for her to know because she didn't realize that to us, some of those things were more stressful than they were helpful. And so, some other things where you might have to set boundaries or be a little bit more forthcoming is I found that if people wanted to bring meals, thankfully I had my sister, right? She was able to set up a web page, have somebody do that for you, right? You don't need to necessarily be doing that yourself. If people ask what you need, be honest with them. Otherwise, you might get, another pair of fuzzy socks when you really needed someone to take your kids for the afternoon. And don't get me wrong, I love fuzzy socks, but I also would love for someone to take my kids. So during that time, and if people want to visit, have them come at a time that's good for you and maybe even consider setting a time limit based on your level of exhaustion that day. Start to delegate things. I remember here I was in the pandemic, diagnosed with breast cancer, and one day my dishwasher broke. And you would have thought the world was falling apart. I was on the floor in tears. And my therapist simply said, your husband needs to get a dishwasher. Like, take that off the list, right? You don't need that on there. When I had a list of things I needed to buy for surgery, I thought, okay, my mom can do these things. She can go get the bras. She can buy the shower stool, whatever it is. So bottom line, people want to help, and allowing them to do that gives them a good feeling, which is great. And that continues to snowball, right? Help is good. And it's good when it's useful and not adding something to your plate, because it allows us to focus on our healing. And that's really what we need to do. And I've had to keep some of these boundaries up in survivorship. My mom still asks a lot of questions. I still have a lot of appointments, and she wants to know every single detail, and God love her. She's wonderful and amazing. And I'm now at a place where I have told her that I will fill her in on the things that I believe are useful information for her to know. She doesn't need to know every time of every appointment and every time of everything. So, encouraging you to do that and to set those healthy boundaries for yourself. And a journaling prompt that you can use with that is, who in your life might it benefit? With who in your life could it be beneficial for you to set some boundaries with? And again, it might be personal, it might be professional. And then the third thing that I want to share with you today that is so important to my heart and soul, and one of the reasons we're here today, is surrounding yourself with community. And I want to be clear that this is not just any community. I want you to find communities where you feel welcome, where you feel heard and seen. And I want, these communities can be within breast cancer and outside. So I attended a couple of support groups virtually through a local organization here. And I just didn't, it was different people each time. And sometimes people would show up and sometimes they didn't. And I didn't feel this was my, I personally didn't feel like a level of trust in it. It wasn't run by somebody who had actually been through breast cancer. And when I participated in the 12-week virtual here, it was so incredibly different. Those calls, those had an alchemy to them that you could just feel. And I know anyone who was on those probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. There was no judgment, it was full acceptance. And you were amongst people who could understand. And so surrounding yourself with a community like this and others, I feel is just crucial to our well-being and to getting through all of cancer. Outside of breast cancer, surrounding yourself with people who understand you, people who are going to be there for you on those really shitty days, and who will know whether sometimes you need to be lifted and sometimes you need to be left alone. I'm so blessed by this community and to have work friends and family and friends who have been able to do things like that. I remember coming out of my MRI, which I was terrified of, and finding a bouquet of sunflowers and a card on my car from my sister. So people like that who are going to really positively impact what could be a really hard and difficult time. And so the journaling prompt for that one is, what type of people do you like to surround yourself with? And are there any relationships in your life that may not be having a positive effect on your health and well-being? So wherever you are in your cancer fuckery, I hope that these 3 touchstones provide you with some ease and light. I hope that you will honor your feelings and know they're valid. I hope that you will try to set some healthy boundaries if you don't have them in place, and that you will continue, and I say continue because if you're here today, you already have the community. Continue to surround yourself with community, because as someone who went through cancer thinking I was going to be positive all the time, I can tell you that for me, it was a much healthier approach to implement these things, and it helped significantly. There's so much that we have to think about during breast cancer, and it ebbs and flows at, different times in our lives, but I'm pretty confident to say at this point that I don't know that it's ever going to go away from my mind. And so I wrote Bearing It All because when I was in the thick of things, I felt so alone, like I said. And while I had different people in my life that I could talk to, I just craved a conversation with someone who would get it. I wanted someone who would truly understand. And so my hope is that through this book and through conversations like these, that women with breast cancer will feel less alone. I want them to feel like they're sitting with me and I'm holding their hand as they read this book, and that those who are so fortunate not to be diagnosed with breast cancer can read this and gain an inside perspective into what it's like going through what we've been going through. Breast cancer is messy. It's really messy, and it's complicated, and it's scary. And yet at times I had some very beautiful moments. And I'll never forget the moment I looked into the mirror after my husband shaved my head, and I actually felt beautiful, and I felt like a badass, and it gives me chills just to even think about it. That was a beautiful, beautiful time for me. And I believe that while there is beauty in mess, there was a whole lot of mess, and Bearing It All shares all of that. And there is so much more work to be done here. There's women with breast cancer, we deserve safe, sacred spaces to fully and honestly express our emotions, be it through conversation, creativity, and spirituality together. And the touchstones that I shared with you today are just a peek into what I share in Bearing It All. And to me, this book is more than just a book. This book is about love, it's about hope, and it's about community. It's about raising awareness and creating more conversations around mental and emotional health, and really the truth behind what emotional and mental effects breast cancer can bring with it. So
This has
I
been
hope,
so, oh, sorry, Amy, this has been
yeah,
so amazing to hear you talk about this after I've reviewed your book. Can you bring my screen back? I'm using my
yes.
screen, but you're the host, so I can't bring it back myself.
I can do that. Hang on.
It's
I'm just going to turn it back to you to open.
no, it's okay. This has been so wonderful.
I see. Oh, change panelist appearance. No, that's not it.
Uh, sorry to interrupt you, but at the bottom where there's participants, just hit that and see where there's panelists and attendees, hit panelists, and then restore, reclaim.
Yeah, I'm in the participants. Panelists. More. Says I can pin you or chat you.
Oh, you disappeared. I don't know where you went. Amy, are you still there? Well, to that end, oh, Amy, you disappeared. I'm not sure why you disappeared, but I just had a couple of things to say. I'm so appreciative of you sharing your breast cancer fuckery experience. I know certainly when I read it, there was so much that I could relate to. And there's been so many thoughts swirling in my mind, as I'm sure all of our guests in the audience can relate to as well. The one thing that I circled a couple of things that you said, and your sister who said that you are not failing, you are feeling, I think is absolutely beautiful. I think, one of the things that we really set out to do with I Rise Above Breast Cancer is to challenge old paradigms and change perceptions of what it means to have breast cancer. And I've always struggled since, the time I was diagnosed with breast cancer 11 years ago plus, with how there's this, this pretty element attached to it, this pink and this pretty and this, expectation, so to speak, around it. And then the limitations of just being called a survivor versus, getting to be somewhere beyond that experience, where you're actually thriving. And I think that's really what you're talking a lot about is, with regards to the cancer is not pretty. It is not pretty. There's so much about it that is not pretty. And so I really applaud you, Amy, for having the courage to be honest about the experience. And I hope that everybody reads this because everybody is touched by breast cancer in some way, shape, or form. And it's not just preparing those who've been diagnosed or helping those who've been diagnosed have permission to feel, making sure that they feel okay about expressing themselves and feel good about it and know that it's natural. I think also having loved ones read it and have a better understanding for how they can actually support is super important as well. So there's a lot, I want to be respectful of everyone's time for this webinar. Amy, I'm not sure where you disappeared to. I see you're in the audience. But if there's anybody who has any questions or comments, please send them through the chat. Or what I can also do is put you in touch with Amy following this so that you can have direct communication with her and ask any questions that you may have, or just reach out for some support. We've been through this. So to that end, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and hope that you'll join us again for our next webinar in the series coming up in April. Look to our website where that will be posted, and we'll see you next time.